Hello.
We went on the internet and found out something about the maker, which was interesting.
So there was one speaker. Oh, really? Well, that's good. Good evening, everybody. This is our September 11th meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission for the City of Ojai. We'll start with roll call. Ms. Wold?
Oh my goodness, I don't know if I won't slaughter everybody's names. So Commissioner Rooney?
Here.
Commissioner or Vice Chair Walker?
Present.
Commissioner Hill?
Present.
Commissioner Boggs?
Here.
Commissioner Basacci?
Here.
And Museum Representative Brian Akins? And Chair McCready?
Thank you. Here.
All present.
Are we going to, will we go directly to the Historic Sites of Merit meeting?
Yes, we're right. The 4 o'clock, we're here an hour early this evening. The 4 o'clock is a workshop.
Okay.
And so if you want to go straight into that, that's fine. I will go and change the camera over so Mr. Walker can do his presentation.
Can we get a sheet for this workshop?
Yeah, you should have an agenda.
It's in the packet?
It's just one sheet, and it just talks about, let's see. Yes, very first item there, and it says discussion item, Historic Sites of Merit.
This one, on the cover. That's it.
And I do have one speaker card.
Right in front of
Okay, so I guess if you want to turn it over, Vice Chair Walker's going to give your PowerPoint, and I will go put it on the camera for you. Hold on.
Do you want to tell me when you're ready?
Commissioner McCready, I've got a point I'd like to bring up already. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hill?
The point I'd like to bring up is that I'm not sure about what I'm about to say, is that I believe this has already been done. We, for years, prepared reports, and each commissioner had a thick binder of which the city should now be in possession of from each of us, and every single one, I don't know about every single specific one on our Sites of Merit list, but just about in the entirety of it has been done. And it's what we used to, it was our preliminary that we used for establishing historic reports for each of these buildings when we did a landmark designation. And so to proceed with that, I know Craig's got a great presentation. I love watching it every time. But as far as working in a workshop and filling out a blank questionnaire about each one of these, I don't think it's necessary. I think the city already has this.
Right, well, I apologize for your liaison not being here tonight, Heather, but I think my understanding of the workshop tonight was just an outreach to the public and sort of the community at large to explain exactly what being on a historic sites of merit. We wanted to do outreach. That was the issue, as I understood it, was that while these properties are on a list, we never actually specifically reached out to each individual property owner by, as they are legally held. And then, by doing that this time and noticing, sending it out and providing notice, hopefully we get some of those people in so that we can educate them on how to move forward from being on a sites of merit list to maybe possibly landmarking their property. So I thought that was, and I might be wrong, but that was my understanding of tonight's workshop, was to inform the public. So what really happens when you're on a list of sites of merit? What's the next stages? What happens if I were to want a landmark? And so that's where I thought we were going with this, and I can...
that sounds perfectly plausible to me.
Okay.
But we got in the agenda, we got a list, and we were to work from that list and fill out those, we voted on sheets that we were
Okay.
going to use. And that's what I'm questioning.
Okay, so the sheets that are, when we had discussions before specifically that came up about the fire station site, the idea was to try to standardize the information that we're requiring from applicants so that made the process a little bit more transparent for them and a little less scary. Because sometimes we get people that aren't really sure if they want to be landmarked or not and how much work is it going to be. And so I thought the idea was I think Heather was providing those just for the commission to take a look at them and to be able to recommend to staff, this is what we want people to get when they, it's kind of, at some point would be packaged into a handout you'd be giving to people, which I know we already have handouts, but I mean a package. So I think that there's a disconnect between being on a sites of merit, understanding what happens when you landmark, and then also then understanding what's required of you when you want to do a Mills Act. So many people don't realize that there's some work involved. Yes, so I think that's where we're going with this. We're trying to just make the process easier, more transparent, and then involve the public a little bit more, in particular involving these people that are on this list that was established that prioritized how the city really wanted sites to come in, which one are the most important to the city to maintain the integrity of, and to work with those people and sort of start doing outreach.
What I'm referring to in specific, and it's a question of, perhaps in this instance, I've misinterpreted the agenda. I was referring to the Historic Preservation Commission's, they call it the evaluation surveys, which is in section
4.
4, and that's what I'm referring to.
Right, and I think that's only going to be relevant for the people that move forward.
Okay,
Okay.
Yeah, it's on our agenda, too.
I
It's
know,
not on-
I know.
Go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead. I was going to start the presentation. but
Oh,
if you
I
have
just
some-
wanted to thank the homeowners that came. I'm very
Absolutely.
pleased that you came and hope you have questions to ask us that we can answer. And in fact, I'd like to hear some of your comments, how you feel about your property, too. So thank you for coming.
I'm sorry, are you ready for the presentation?
Yeah. Okay, one of the, I guess, charges of the Historic Preservation Commission is to identify the historic properties that exist within the city of Ojai, not only to protect them, but to identify them. And at one point a few years ago, there was a survey done that identified hundreds of properties, and I think the council felt that was a little unwieldy, and we were asked to go back and form a committee and identify the 30 to 40 properties within the city limits that we felt had the most historic value, that we could say these are sites of merit. They're not landmarks, and they don't carry with them all of the restrictions but also benefits that a landmark has. That's something that has to be done in cooperation with the landowner, so it can't be done just by us unilaterally. But we do want to identify which they are, because we don't want to wake up one morning and find that there has been a demolition and a property has been raised and we had no knowledge of it, or we didn't even know it was a historic property until after the fact. So we did form a committee. It had members of the Ojai Valley Museum, the commission, and other members of the community that were interested to try to go through and identify if we had to come up with 30 to 40 of our most historic properties that we really want to see protected or to see continue, that these would be them. And so after a lot of work, we put together the slideshow. Some of you may have seen it before because we had a meeting about a year ago or so where we gave it, but I will just go through it and talk a little bit about each one. This is the Montgomery Baker House, was one of the first homes in the city of Ojai. It is located on Matilaha Street. It was originally entered from Ojai Avenue. And you can see the carriage on the bottom was on Ojai Avenue, but now it's on Matilaha Street because a street was extended through there in front of the house. It was built by pioneer John Montgomery in 1874 and is one of the few remaining Victorian homes in the city. The house was later owned by Edwin Baker, who made several additions in 1886. It's now the Porch Gallery. This is the Presbyterian Manse. It was the home built for the acting minister of the Presbyterian Church. The original structure burned down in the Great Fire of 1917. This replacement was designed by Mead and Requa in 1919. These were the architects Mr. Libby hired to design his downtown improvement project in 1917. The El Roble Hotel was one of the buildings Mr. Libby commissioned Mead and Requa to build. This photograph was taken from the post office tower looking west at the El Roble Hotel and the Catholic chapel behind it. In the early 1950s, the El Roble was renovated and renamed the Oaks Hotel. Don and Sheila Clough recently remodeled it to recapture the original design. The Smith Hobson House, where we're sitting right now, was originally built in 1907 in the Craftsman style. When the firm of Mead and Requa was in town, they were commissioned to renovate the home's exterior in the Mission Revival style. The building now serves as the Ojai City Hall. The inside still retains some of its original Craftsman design. The Ojai Grammar School was designed by Santa Paula architect Roy Wilson. Today, the old Ojai Grammar School serves as the Ojai Unified School District offices and Chaparral School. Many years ago, the bell tower was declared unsafe and it was lowered by several feet. So it's still there, it's just a lot shorter. Nordhoff High School. Roy Wilson also designed the 1929 Nordhoff High School buildings in Mission Revival style. In 1967, the school became Matilaha Junior High School. This is the Moore House on Foothill Road. It's another widely recognized mid-century modern masterpiece. Richard Neutra and other mid-century modern architects used an open floor plan and large windows to open up the house internally and bring the beauty of the valley into the house. This is Gray Gables. In 1954, Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus moved the National Retired Teachers Association to Ojai and established Gray Gables as the prototype of a new kind of retirement community. It was featured at the 1964 New York World's Fair as the future of retirement living in America. It was here at Gray Gables that Dr. Andrus founded AARP in 1958. When AARP's membership reached 400,000, the offices were moved to Long Beach, and now it still continues as a retirement community called the Gables. The Acacia's nursing home. In 1959, Dr. Andrus and her new Ojai-based organization, AARP, built this revolutionary nursing home. It was one of the first nursing homes operated by a nonprofit organization and the first nursing home in America based on gerontology research. The Presbyterian Church. Carlton Winslow beat out Wallace Neff and local architect Austin Pierpont for the commission to design Ojai's Presbyterian Church in 1930. Winslow was one of the nation's top mission revival architects. He worked with Bertram Goodhue to design the buildings in San Diego's Balboa Park for the 1915 Panama Pacific Exposition. Ed Keith's garage. Ed Keith renovated his city garage to match the mission style of the new arcade and pergola. For many years, the building has housed the Ojai Cleaners. The Isis Theater was the city's first mission revival building, predating Libby's downtown renovation by 3 years. The Isis Theater was built by one of Ojai's most successful developers, J.J. Burke. It is also one of the city's oldest businesses. Today it operates as the Ojai Playhouse and is unfortunately undergoing extensive renovation as a result of the water main break. The Ojai Art Center, Austin Pierpont ran the family's Pierpont Inn during his younger years. He developed his architectural skills, adding various cottages and buildings to the Pierpont Inn in Ventura. In spite of having only a degree in civil engineering, Pierpont became a versatile and successful architect, not only in the Ojai Valley, but throughout Southern California. He designed the Ojai Valley Inn in 1934, the addition to the Country Club. And he did many other important works around the Ojai Valley.
Wait, where was that? I don't know my way around that good, so I can't figure out where that is.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is the Art Center. It's on South Montgomery Street. It's across from Cafe Emporium.
Oh, okay, sorry.
This is the old Nordhoff Library. A driving force behind Nordhoff's community library was Sherman Day Thatcher, the founder and headmaster of the Thatcher School. He donated most of the books and gave a large cash donation as well. In return, the old library was named after Sherman's brother, George Thatcher, who died shortly after his arrival in Ojai. The building was originally located where the Art Center is now, but was later moved to Lyon Street. So it's still there on Lyon Street, back up behind the arcade. These are the Oak Glen Cottages, a mile or so east of town, where the Oak Glen Cottages, started by William McKee in 1874. It was the valley's first resort, catering to those who came looking for a cure. The Oak Glen Cottages had one of Ventura County's first golf courses. It later opened as the Golly Cottages and is now a private residence. The Crotona Institute. When Albert P. Warrington and the Theosophists followed Krishnamurti to Ojai in 1924, Warrington wanted the buildings of Crotona to reflect Mr. Libby's artistic vision. He first approached Wallace Neff to design Crotona, but Neff was too expensive, so Warrington hired Robert Stacy Judd. Above is the front entrance to the library. The large assembly hall on the right was added later by Santa Paula architect Roy Wilson. And this is up on Crotona Hill. The Ojai Pergola. In 1917, Edward Libby bought up all the businesses on the south side of Ojai Avenue and created Civic Center Park. These arches, connected by a wisteria-covered pergola, were grand entrances through which cars could enter the park. The pergola was reconstructed in 1999 using REQA's original plans found in San Diego. The Ojai Library. The current Ojai Library was designed by Carlton Winslow, who also designed the Presbyterian Church. The library is one of the few buildings in the valley that actually reflects secular Spanish and Mexican architecture from the Spanish period. The Maravilla Improvement Company was Mr. Libby's real estate offices for his Arbolada development. Today it is the library's secondhand bookstore, Twice Told Tales. The Masonic Lodge. Berkeley Brandt was a Chicago architect who moved to Ojai in 1923. Today, the old Masonic Lodge is a private residence. The Liberal Catholic Church. John Roney was an Ojai architect who moved to the valley with the Crotona colony. He designed several buildings around town. This Redwood Church, the Liberal Catholic Church, was designed by Roney in 1929. It was actually built in Miners Oaks near Crotona, but in 1949 it was moved across the valley to its present location in the East End. Mr. Roney also designed the Taj Mahal in Siete Robles and the Baird Mansion in Miners Oaks. Ojai Valley School. Frank Frost, a wealthy Ojai resident, convinced Mr. Libby that people would not buy his Arbolada lots unless there was a quality private school in the neighborhood. So Libby donated the land and part of the funds to build Ojai Valley School, a progressive school based on the educational philosophy of Edward Yeomans. Wallace Neff was hired to design the first buildings. This building was named after Frank Frost. The Boyd Center. The Jack Boyd Memorial Club served as a social and recreational center for the men of the Ojai Valley. Women were only allowed in on the first Thursday after the full moon. Samuel M. Ilsley was a popular Santa Barbara architect who contributed several fine craftsman structures to the valley around the turn of the century, including the Boyd Club, the Foothills Hotel, and several buildings at Thatcher School. The Boyd Club was moved to Tsars OD Park in 1957 and is still there in Tsars OD Park. This is the Frank Ayres home. Frank Ayres was the son of Robert Ayres, one of Ojai's first pioneers. Frank and Fanny Ayres lived in this house for 20 years. It still stands on Grand Avenue next to the Baptist Church. The Ojai Bakery. Bill Baker was known for the lavish cakes he created for many special occasions, World's Fairs, President's birthdays, and inaugurations. But Bill Baker also invented a lima bean bread and a soy bread that were famous around the country and took advantage of the county's early lima bean industry. The building now houses Azu Restaurant. Barts Books is America's largest independently owned outdoor bookstore, and it is one of Ojai's most famous buildings. Started by Richard Bartendale in 1964, it is known for the honor system it uses for paying for the books after hours. Barts Books is hands down one of Ojai's biggest tourist attractions. The Fox House is another of Ojai's original Victorian homes. It is one of the few examples of a style called Second Empire because the top floor looks like a Paris building with its mansard roof. It is now the girls' dormitory of the Weil Tennis Academy. The Tsars OD House was probably moved to this location from Tsars OD Park when Mr. Tsars OD, Tony Tsars OD, donated the land for the park. This is the Willard Hall Francis House. He was an architect who built this on North Signal Street for himself and his family in 1940. He was one of the younger pre-World War II modern architects. He studied under Frank Lloyd Wright and was influenced by him. He was also an accomplished artist and very involved with the Arts Center during its early years in the 1940s. The Pacific Bell Building was built to house the exchange for the Valley's first manual dial telephones. 445 telephones were installed in 1929, the year this building was built. Whoops. This is the Daniel Webster House, a fine example of Tudor-style architecture. It was built by Robert Winfield, who Edward Libby brought to Ojai to build his new downtown structures. He built the Arcade, the Pergola, and the El Roble Hotel. The Ojai Ice Plant. The ice plant was first started by Fred Houck in the Isis Theater building in 1914, where the Jester is now. In 1920, it moved here to Fox Street. Ice was stored here and delivered around town to be used for refrigeration. The old Ojai Olive Mill. George Bald ran the olive mill, which was in the basement of this building on Bald Street. At the turn of the century, the olive industry was bigger in the valley than citrus and is staging something of a comeback today. This is the William Mallory House and is a great example of Austin Pierpont's architecture. It was the home of William Mallory, who was the Western Union operator in the valley. He also served as a city councilman and Ojai's postmaster. This is the Humane Society building. Eric Lloyd Wright was the grandson of Frank Lloyd Wright. He designed this building. The funds for this building were generously donated by Slim and Sarah Bayless, who ran Bayless Market here in town. The Fairburn Estate. William Armstrong Fairburn was president of the Diamond Match Company headquartered in New York. However, Mr. Fairburn ran the company from his home here in Ojai. It was most recently the home of John and Ginger Wilson. This is the Michael Hugh Clark House. The house is next to the Ojai Lumber Company. This is where Tom Clark, a Ventura County supervisor, and his brother Bob Clark grew up. Bob was a sheriff and ran the Ojai Library for many years. These are some of our historic structures that are gone but not forgotten. Possibly a preservation plan might have saved them. This was the Ojai State Bank, located across from the arcade. It's now a parking lot, but this stately old neoclassical building designed by Silas Burns, a famous Southern California architect, was located. The Foothills Hotel, there's a private home there now. This was one of the 4 grand hotels of California back during the turn of the century, and it included the Raymond Hotel in Pasadena, the Potter Hotel in Santa Barbara, and the Coronado Hotel in San Diego. And many famous Easterners would come and stay here, and this was torn down, I believe, in the 1960s. The Nordhoff High School, this building was torn down, and I believe there's just grass there now. But this was one of the only bungalow-style high schools in the country at one time. It was a beautiful bungalow-style high school, and it was torn down to make way for the new buildings when the campuses between Nordhoff and Matilaha were switched. This is the Ojai Pergola, which I mentioned before. The original structure was torn down one morning at 6 a.m., even though the citizens had raised the money to repair and renovate it. But it was decided that it was in the way and its time was past, and maybe Ojai would try a different look, so it was torn down. And for 28 years, we didn't have the pergola. And then in 1999, David Mason and some other citizens raised the money and had the pergola rebuilt. And this is the old Ojai Grammar School, designed by F.P. Ward. It was located where the district offices are now. It housed both Nordhoff High School and, when it was first put into effect, and the grammar school. And when the new buildings were built, it was moved to the back of the property, and then eventually it was torn down. And this is the Baptist Church, which is was located where the parking lot is now by the World University, there on the corner of Ventura Street and Matilaha Street. And so that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Walker. We do have one speaker request card. I think we'll entertain that now. I think it's the perfect time. Reverend James Varall, I hope I didn't mispronounce your name.
That was a very good attempt. I'm not sure how it's pronounced either. It's a French-Swiss name, sort of. But anyway, I just wanted to say I am here today because I was perplexed. I received your letter a few days ago. I thought it was just a boilerplate letter you mailed to the whole community. Didn't know that it was directed at our church in particular, or that we were included on the list. Only today, when I looked at the website, the City Council's website, did I see that we were, in fact, included. So I'm perplexed as to what the ramifications of this are, what the implications are, and what effect it will have on us. And so that's what I wanted to speak about. I'm sorry there was no. I'm surprised we didn't have a meeting with someone from your committee or your staff and talk about it prior to this. That's what I wanted to say. And that also applies to Crotona, where I work. So we're in the same boat. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's one of the reasons that we're having this. It is outreach, and it's not an effort to accomplish landmarking these properties here or tonight or anything like that. We have had joint meetings with the City Council covering this historic sites of merit. We've talked about the historic sites of merit, and I think there have been articles in the paper about it over the last couple of years. So what your comments show me is that we have more outreach to do. And so I'm glad we're having this meeting tonight.
And I think the main idea was, like I said before, just to put it on the city's radar screen so that if a request for a demolition permit came through or a request for some major alteration to the building came through, it would at least alert the city that possibly this was a building that was a recognized historic site and that it should be given some further review. It wouldn't necessarily mean that you couldn't demolish the building or that it couldn't be renovated. It would just be that it deserved a pass before this commission and the council to be able to take a further look at it and maybe hold a dialogue with you about what your plans were. And I think also we all secretly harbor the hope that possibly you would see that it is a historic building and possibly you would be willing to have it landmarked and be willing to have it become one of the city's. We now have 20 landmarks, but that's something that would be done only with your cooperation.
Step forward, please. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. John Lambert. I work with the Friends of the Library with the Twice Sold Tales building,
Oh, thank you.
Livy's old land office. We recognize absolutely that this is an important building in the history of Ojai. But some of you may well know that we are in the process of looking to rebuild that structure. So my question is, one, I also wondered what, having been identified as a landmark without having it registered as such officially, if that, what kind of ramification that has. And my question is the Libby building is an interesting building. If that picture showed the building as its structure was in the mid-1920s, it was added onto since that time. In fact, the structure that was added was all built right on the dirt. So it's had quite a termite colony over the last 90 years. And as we move towards rebuilding this, where we want to rebuild the bookstore and add the meeting room to the back, is it possible, I mean, we recognize it's historic, and our plans are to maintain the facade. In fact, we hope to rebuild the pergola that you saw in the picture and put the benches back where they used to be in the front, so that from the street, it will look as if it was the original building. What we want to do from that point on is have a new structure which meets all the earthquake requirements and is a green building. Can you designate a part of the building?
Actually,
A facade?
Actually, you can.
You know, because that's the kind of thing we're looking at.
Yes,
We
you can.
recognize it's historic, and whether or not it's so designated, we plan on doing that. So-
You can designate part of a building, and the commission was aware of your plans. And, but to answer your first question, what does it mean to be an historic site of merit in terms of your use of the building? Nothing is the answer. There's no change in the status of the building. But part of preservation and part of our charge as commissioners is to expand our knowledge of the historic sites of merit in our city. And the charge that we were given by the city council, as Mr. Walker said, was to hone it down, focus on some places that we think are the most significant, and that was the thrust of this first effort in these 37 sites.
Well, let me
Can I
follow-
just
I'll just
Commissioner
one
Walker?
point, because maybe it's a similar situation. We had before us a proposal by the Weil Academy having to do with the house that was the Fox House, and they wanted to add on to it a huge structure that would be their dormitories and add to it. But they worked with us, and they managed to preserve the older house to look pretty close. I mean, it's undergone some changes over the years, but the project was approved, so they have a much bigger structure on the back. But people driving by, like you're suggesting, can see this old house much as it was when the Fox family lived there. So we're very open to that. We really are open to adaptive reuse. The idea that these old buildings, we don't want them just to sit there empty, but to be used, and really want to work with the property owners.
Let me follow it up with a more mundane question. It has to do with money. A historic review done by, say, Senator Buenaventura, his research, costs $2,000 or $3,000, $4,000, depending on the kind of review it is. From what I'm hearing, my question is that really necessary if we're repurposing a building, yet maintaining the look of it as a historic part of the city of Ojai? Need we spend that kind of money as part of the process?
That would be a question.
Well, I think that, I'll throw this back to you guys, but I believe that the commission tries to work with people and with local historians too. So it's not, is that correct? That you don't always require them to hire an outside source?
Outside of the area?
No, no, I mean, sometimes, as you were saying earlier, Commissioner Hill, there are things already established on some of these houses. They're so well-known. So the history behind them is well documented.
One of the things that, you're right about that, and one of the things that we have done in the past, some of the commissioners have taken up the task of preparing the report themselves, rather than hiring out Treatment Associates or San Buenaventura and others. That could be done. We have talked a little bit about the project since it's coming up now, and it was in one of our last agendas. And my recommendation would be, whatever your plans are, to bring it to our commission just for a concept review. This wouldn't necessarily be an application for a landmark status or anything of that type, but it would just be a concept review, and it would be more of an informal discussion, and we could really get down to the meat and potatoes of the whole thing. And in my own estimation, I think that the thing that the Sites of Merit Committee is concerned about is the facade, as you are too. And the idea, the notion of bringing back the pergola in front of the old Libby office is super, as far as we're concerned. And to save that, and to save that frontage, is something that, at least for speaking for myself, is something that I think would be worth pursuing. As far as the rest of the building, I agree. It's just a rectangular tube back there that needs to be reconstructed. We just have to look at the ISIS Theater to see, what the potential of some of these old buildings are structurally. And so that, I couldn't see where that would be far-fetched. And so I'd recommend you come back to our commission with your plans and so on, and we'll just sit down and talk about it.
I believe it's on your September,
Oh, we are going to have it.
or the October 9th meeting, because it got moved, right?
Oh, okay.
And I was also going to say that, staff is always available to you too, to explain how the landmarking works and how Mills Act works, which is the property tax
Well,
relief.
we're 501c3,
You're
so it
501.
doesn't.
Okay, so it doesn't affect you.
Yeah.
But we can go over the Department of Interior requirements just as the commission can. We can go over that with you and talk about the levels. And it's like they're explaining to you that, putting back the pergola is another level of how they see restoration and historic preservation. There's levels of, either you preserve what's there or you reconstruct, those types of things. We can explain that to you. But I agree, I did think we were taking it back before you concepts. I think it's a really great idea.
And there are regulations that come into play from other than the HPC for older buildings and
Right, there's a specific building code
Right.
that governs historic buildings.
Yeah.
That's more lenient than building a brand-new building.
Well, that's one of the advantages of
Yes.
having a designation, is that you are eligible then for the state of California's historic building code, which is much more lenient for people doing remodels.
Do you have any idea about the boulders that were in front by the pillars of the pergola?
That's what they're talking about.
the boulders?
Yes, next to the pillars, there were these two, one on each side, beautiful, perfectly round boulders.
Of the library building?
We're talking about
used
the
books
library
in
building
front,
or
in front of the
Libby's?
used bookstore. where the pillars were.
I have no in the pictures I
I don't
have
know
seen.
if you haven't seen any in the pictures.
No.
Those are rounded pillars.
I love rocks.
We have a couple of big boulders out back if you're interested. No, thank you so much.
No, thank you. Carlin Sterrett.
Thank you, Carlin Strobel, Mayor currently. I would request that you explain to the viewing audience and those here that this is the historic sites of merit. Let people know any immediate impact for being on that list, and let people know what the HPC's objective is for having a house on that list. Does that make sense?
I think we.
Well, I think that the meaning of being on the list to the property owner, in fact, there's really no meaning, there's no effect, no tax effect, there's no increased limitations on their ability to alter or change the building. But it is, as I have already said, it is part of our work to identify historic sites of merit and to try to expand that list and to try to expand those protections for those buildings. Now, how we go about that, that's why we're here tonight, and that's why we're doing this outreach, so that people can give us the feedback and tell us what we need to do to communicate better with them.
Okay, and what I wanted the public to understand is that being on the historic sites list is not landmark designation.
No.
They're
it's-
two totally separate issues.
Right.
And so while we might want to entice people, being on the historic sites list is not landmark designation. So
No,
that's
and-
what I wanted to make clear to the public.
No, and being on the historic sites of merit is not going to cause increased scrutiny from our city agencies.
Right, and I will just add that what Chairman Walker, or Commissioner Walker said a minute ago or earlier on, is that the city has a reputation of, or past practice, I should say, of working with a homeowner. I don't know of any time we've landmarked a property against the property owner's wishes. So just to let that know that, identifying a property, it would not move forward to a landmark application without the property owner consent. That's just how it's done here in Ojai, and I stand to be corrected if I need to be, but that's my understanding.
But I think, too, when you do own a historic property, it does put you on the radar for a review if it comes up, because even CEQA demands that if something is brought before the city and if they have to look at the significant environmental impacts, and one of those is its historic value. So that is our intent, actually, is that when a decision is being made, because right now a person can go to the city desk and ask for a demolition permit, and it doesn't require any review. It's just a ministerial thing, and they can get that, and they could demolish a building without any review. And with some knowledge that this building is historic, it would mean that building should be looked at and at least a conversation had with the Historic Preservation Commission about whether the house was historic and that whether there might be some alternatives, or get a dialogue going. And I think that's a good thing. I think we could all say, as we look at these pictures of these buildings, we would hate to see that somebody could come from Los Angeles and buy one and tear it down without anybody really knowing or having a conversation about it.
Just add that all landmarking decisions, while the commission is an advisory body, that's what they are. They make recommendations to the city council that all landmark properties go before the city council in a public hearing process.
Chair McCready, could I ask two questions, please?
Go ahead.
One is, could the first speaker identify what property he's associated with? And two, was there a plan to identify the people in the audience and which properties they're associated with, so we know who's,
As they speak.
if they're going to speak or as they speak? Yes, please.
The
Thank
first
you.
speaker is representing the Liberty Catholic Church.
The Liberal Catholic Church.
Did I say? I'm sorry.
Liberty?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't get all dressed up for the occasion.
It's hot.
It's hot out. My name is Denise Stour Thornhill, and my husband's here as well, and our house is in the slideshow on Ventura Street in Oak. We attended the meeting about a year ago that was a similar slideshow, and it seems like this meeting is kind of a repetition of that, and my question is, is it up to the owners to decide if they wish to move this forward, in order to see if they qualify for landmark status? Or does the commission make that decision of these 37 structures as to which ones have a better chance of becoming landmarks? And who makes that decision? And what is the process from this point on?
We work with you for the application for landmark status, and we would love it if every owner came forward and wanted to landmark their property. So, but no, we work with you with you preparing the application and the report, and it could be a city landmark or it could be Mills Act.
But if you're interested, you can come down to the city desk and request an application and just
Okay.
make out the application, and once you do, you would be basically nominating your house to become a city landmark, and then that would come before us, and there would be a report written, and we would evaluate it, and we would make a recommendation then to the city council that it be landmarked. And if it was landmarked, you could also at the same time apply for Mills Act status. The Mills Act gives you tax benefits for being a landmark, where you can save between 40 and 60% of your annual property taxes, with the expectation that that money it's going to require a little extra money to be able to maintain the house as a landmark, and so you would be able to get that tax break to be able to maintain the house.
Okay.
And
So
you would
just-
fill out
yeah.
an application for that too.
Okay, so there's two different applications, it sounds like. So just being on the list right now qualifies any one of us to approach the city and the commission about going through the process of potentially becoming a landmark. And is there just the two statuses, the site of merit, which is what ours are now, correct? And then the next step is a landmark level of status?
City of
correct?
Ojai
Okay.
landmark.
Okay.
And then Mills Act is beyond that. Mills Act is the level at which it carries tax
Okay,
benefits.
Okay. And in the process of going through that, we would have a better understanding of what it means to be a landmark before we commit to it in terms of any remodeling we may wish to do and what kind of
Absolutely.
limitations are upon us. Okay. So would that be a meeting with the commission would be the first step?
Or with staff.
Or
Well,
with-
I would,
okay,
I
or
would
with staff.
recommend that you
Okay.
meet with staff, and
Okay.
then you talk. The benefit of the commission is they have a wealth of information as to what they feel is the features of your particular property that they think are valuable. So landmarking status also means that if you listen to our meetings, it's often sometimes the entire property is landmarked, sometimes it's just the house that's landmarked, and so what controls you have over your property for remodels and things of that nature would be dependent on what features they felt were important to be preserved. So I think if you're thinking about landmarking, that you would talk with staff and come in with some ideas of what you think, or maybe we together we would work this out, and then we would bring it back for the commission for them to get to give you feedback on that. So if you said, I really want the freedom on the outside of my property, I don't want to landmark the whole property, but I'm willing to do the structure, then they would have dialogue back with you. And I think that's the kind of things that we want people to understand, that there is some discretion with the commission on what a landmark status gives you or what you're giving up. And then, of course, the Mills Act would be the same way. You would work with staff and then ultimately come in front of the commission and talk about, what you're expected to do or what you're expected to maintain and that type of thing. So it's totally, I think the commission is willing to work with conceptual ideas and bring it back and forth to get to a sense of comfort for you that you are not going into the unknown, and if you apply for landmark status, that you kind of know, what's going to be expected of you.
Okay. So it somewhat sounds like you may be the first person to contact. Okay.
Probably.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I have one other thing that I would like to say to you. The fact that your property has been selected and is on the Site of Merit list meant that all the properties in Ojai are kind of reviewed by us as far as whether they're historical or not. We've gone through big situations where we have employed an outside company, and they surveyed the entire city. And that was this big package that was the subject of a city workshop a number of years ago. And we all gathered, and we took the people that had a good understanding of the history of Ojai. We had David Mason was part of that commission, or that committee, Greg Walker, myself, Rose Bogg, who's on that committee, Brian Akins, representative of the museum, was on that committee. Anyway, we looked at all these properties, and we said, these are the 37 that are the most important at this particular time. And so the very nature that you're on that list, there's already been a discussion that it's historic and that it's worthy. So I just wanted to, so don't think that we're just picking you out of the sky. There is a reason why.
Are there any other comments during this open mic period? Any other questions for the commissioners? So I think that's good for our workshop. Thank you. Thanks for attending.
Thank you. I do have one last question.
Go ahead.
Those of us listed in the slide,
Mm-hmm.
at this point in time, there is no legal obligation to us for anything
That's right.
as a result of having been identified.
That's right.
So you guys need to move to make it so somehow or another. Is that kind of the way it's moving?
With-
Just so that it's
with
doesn't
you.
stop where a review comes out.
Uh-huh.
But right now, we can, yeah,
Right now, you could apply for a demolition permit.
yeah, that's what I thought I heard.
Well,
Thanks, good night.
I'm sitting back in my chair so I can so I can talk to you as the planner, and because of, it is true that if you're applying for a ministerial demo permit, the city has no controls over you getting one. In your particular case, because you're commercial, your review is always discretionary, what you're doing. And as Commissioner Walker said, CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, requires that for any building, and it's usually 50 years old or older. So, while these are very historic properties, anything really 50 years or older gets caught underneath the SHPO requirements, and we have to look at it to see if you're doing something that then damages a historic.
Oh, yeah, no, I understood that.
So,
we don't plan to rip
right.
the whole thing down. It just seemed to me that what I was hearing was exactly that these are properties they're of great value to the history of where we live. We want to maintain them so that we have part of this living history, but right now, it's in the process of becoming. I just wanted to clarify it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so since our next meeting is not going to start till 5, do you want to take a break and then start at 5, or do you guys want to roll back?
We'll break until 5 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cindy was here.
Did you get the?
She was at the door. Yeah, she was here.
Good to see you. Yeah, I knew that.
Oh, you did? And she bought the Estelle Clark house.